Hello, everyone. Welcome to the African Esquire show on We Charge Colonialism TV. I am your host, Tierney Cherie, and we're going to go through this week's African news. So let's get started. Joe Biden, the president of the United States, has stated publicly that he will not support reparations for enslaved Africans unless it also includes Native Americans. So watch this video and let's talk about
for
it.
the study. We can deal with.
Well, they're not mutually exclusive. You don't have to wait
No,
around
they're
for the
not
study. That's my
exclusive.
point.
No, but they look. They're not mutually exclusive. But I can't believe that whatever it is, the African American community would not support what I'm talking about. In addition to
Well,
if there are reparations.
I don't think we have to. Let me ask you this then. Let me ask you this so we can move on because we've got to get some phone calls in as well. But let me ask you this then. If in fact a calculation comes to you that you are satisfied with, would you then say, I'm for reparations?
The answer is it would depend on what it was and will it include Native Americans as well.
All right.
Before we even touch this horrible explanation, let's just go back to one of the most important speeches in the history of Africans in America, a speech called The Ballot or the Bullet speech by Malcolm X. If you have not read or listened to the entire speech, it's available on YouTube and also available on the internet. This part right here, though, hits home really with this whole Joe Biden situation. It says, when you see this, you can see that the Negro vote is the key factor. And despite the fact that you are in a position to be the determining factor, what do you get out of it? The Democrats have been in Washington, D.C. only because of the Negro vote. They've been down there for 4 years, and all of the other legislation they wanted to bring up, they brought it up and gotten it out of the way. And now they bring up you. And now they bring up you. You put them first and they put you last because you're a chump. Now, this quote hits home when it comes to Joe Biden because this is someone who has admitted publicly that he would not have been elected president of the United States were it not for the Black vote. He has stated that he was literally not going to be the nominee at one point until some Southern Black constituents essentially pushed him through the primary. And yet, this person has so much gall and disrespect for our people. Let's keep in mind, this is not the only thing that he has shown us his colors on. He's shown us his colors many other times. One of the things is with the policing issue. He wouldn't say things like defund the police when it came to being on a campaign trail, but he certainly did not say what he said in his State of the Union speech. He said, I want to fund the police, not defund the police. He would never have said that when he was running. Yet, here we are again. We listen to someone's rhetoric when they're running. We think that it's actually going to mean something when they're in office. And when they get into office, they show us what they really want to do. They push what they really want to push. They get all of their agenda items out of the way. Now, the other insult about this is not just the fact that we literally put, not we, because I didn't vote for him, but our people literally did put this man inside of the office, yet he feels like he can tell the people who decided he would go into the presidential office that he's not going to act whenever they tell him to act. Obviously, this is at the same time that he has nominated the first Black Supreme Court justice. And I said this last week, that this is all the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson, the same thing as the appointment of Kamala Harris and other appointments that we've seen in the past. These things are all being done intentionally because that is what he's going to use on the campaign trail, whether he runs again or whether he's supporting another Democrat running for president. He's going to say, I gave you a Black person. Forget the fact I did no policies that were going to change anything in your community. I did not push for any policies. I ignored you. I treated you like a child. I lectured you on what's best for you. Despite that fact that he had such audacity to literally tell the people who put him in office that I'm not going to do what you want me to do. I'm going to do what I want to do and on my own terms. Despite that fact, he's going to use the fact that he appointed some Black people to a position, Black people who probably would not rule unlike a white person? Like, is Ketanji Brown Jackson going to rule like a justice that's looking for the interest of African people, or is she going to rule like a Supreme Court justice? I'm sure she's going to rule like a Supreme Court justice, just like Kamala Harris is working like she's a vice president. It doesn't matter if you're a black or white, you're occupying an office. That office has its own protocols, has its own expectations, and none of them have to do with us. And lastly, obviously, the biggest insult, trying to loop this in with the Native American struggle. Now, I'm not someone who tries to negate Native American struggle. I always say that the only group inside of the United States that has a comparable history to us is Native Americans, because essentially there's two groups in the United States that had no choice whenever it came to this country. We had no choice to come here. We had no choice to be exploited. We had no choice to lose everything. And that is Indigenous Americans and Africans in America. So when you look at Indigenous Americans, they had no choice when these white settlers came and stole their land. Not just stole their land, committed horrific genocidal acts to literally, they wiped out their population. I mean, think about it. You probably have not met many, if any, Native Americans inside of your lifetime. I don't know if I've met one person who was full-blooded Native American in my lifetime. And yet these people were completely wiped out and devastated by the United States. So this is obviously a real catastrophe. But we don't need to even bring up this issue when it comes to what we've gone through. What we've gone through is different. What we've gone through is significant. And if you think about it, what we've gone through, if you try to loop those two issues in together, it's also an insult, because we also know that there were some Indigenous Americans that also did own slaves. So how are you going to loop these two groups in together? Again, not to say that we negate Native Americans as also being people who are deserving of reparations, or we negate their struggle and the genocide that was done against them. I'm personally very, very apathetic to what happened to them as well. But I would never politically put those two groups together as necessitating the same type of compensation when it comes to the horrific things that have happened to us. So there's that aspect. But then there's also the aspect that although they have not gotten enough, clearly, most Native Americans are very much living in horrible living conditions, horrible health outcomes, birth outcomes, like literally like the stuff that you see in the Black community, you also see it on Native American reservations. But the government actually did do something to give them reparations. Clearly not enough, clearly not sufficient, but they did something to give them reparations. They've given them land, they've given them money, they've given them different programs. Now, I would never stand and say anything against them continuing to fight for their reparations. Of course, this is group interest. But to try to act like us in our fight for our reparations should be looped in with their fight for reparations when you've already given them reparations. Yet for the people who you've actually brought here against their will, we were not coming on a boat to go on a vacation. We were brought here in chains. You brought here in chains, wiped out their cultural expression, their cultural practices, gave them a pseudo identity of being a second-class citizen in a country that was never meant to represent them to begin with, not to mention enslaving them, raping them, horrible atrocities being done to our people, the castrations and during the lynchings. Like, just think about all of this horrific history. And you don't think you owe these people a dime. You literally said, we've given these people something. We don't owe you a dime. And if we give you a dime, we're going to split that dime between you and these people. A huge insult. If you don't know, the Democrats are not going to give you reparations. They've clearly shown you this is what it is. And so I've always been very clear when it comes to reparations. I don't see any type of real substantive reparations coming in this current political environment. Some people don't like when I say that, but listen, have you proved me wrong? Like, look what's happening in the White House. Look, this is the best option they've given us. Even someone like Bernie Sanders, who was supposed to be like this more radical person, straight up said, no, I'm against reparations. He said it's divisive. So I don't think that this is what's going to be the thing that's going to repair Africans in America, but I do think it could be the thing that's going to push us to distance ourselves from these parties, distance ourselves from political exploitation, from being used, from being treated like we don't have any rights, to from being treated like our votes don't mean anything except for getting an appointment every once in a while. In that essence, yes, I do think that this could be something that really wakes us up to how these people view us, that they really aren't sorry for enslavement. That's really what the reparations issue is. They're not sorry because this is what built this country and they want this type of relationship and exploitation to continue. So they're not sorry. They don't apologize and they show no remorse. So hopefully 2 years from now or 3 years from now, our people will not have amnesia and we will remember very well that Joe Biden literally treated you like you were still a slave, despite the fact that you're literally responsible for him being inside of the White House. So we're going to go over to the continent of Africa and the country of Mali. Some things are being said, and I think that we're kind of seeing the language of the colonial and imperialist powers targeting Mali, a country that really has asserted that they do not want to be overrun by French colonialism in particular. So this is a story. It says Mali troops are suspected of Mali troops and suspected Russian fighters are accused of a massacre. So when I first read this headline, I was going to read through the story and I'm like, okay, I'm going to give this a chance because you don't know if something's propaganda necessarily, but I'll let you know that that was not my overall take after reading through the article. The article says the harrowing accounts are emerging of Malayan troops and suspected Russian mercenaries allegedly executing about 300 people in central Mali. Residents told Human Rights Watch, always watch out for Human Rights Watch, that the killing took place during an operation against militant Islamists over 4 days in late March. Detained men were ordered to walk in groups of up to 10 before being summarily executed. That's what Human Rights Watch has said. Mali's military admitted on Sunday that it had killed more than 200 militants in a large-scale assault on the Tarif of Mora. The West African nation's junta denies that the mercenaries from Russia's Wagner Group are helping it fight the insurgents. On Tuesday, Germany joined the United States, France, and the European Union to call for an independent investigation involving the UN mission in the country into what happened in the village of Mora, which is in Mali's central Mopti region. In its statement, the Human Rights Watch said that there has been a deliberate slaughter of people detained. The Malayan government is responsible for this atrocity, they're saying it's the worst in Mali in a decade, whether carried out by Malayan forces or associated foreign soldiers. So a few things to take away from this. Number one, who are the people who are calling for this investigation? The United States, France, the European Union, and Germany. What do all these countries have in common other than being colonial countries? They're also engaged inside of an international, not outright war, but basically they're trying to isolate Russia right now. And Russia obviously is the country that stepped in whenever France left to offer military aid to Mali. They're not. Do you think that the United States, France, and Germany would have put this out there, that they would have called for an investigation had it not been the case that Russia stepped in, or had it been the case that France was still the country that was basically the power that was supplying military assistance to the Malayan people? Of course not. So clearly this is a calculated move. The picture that's being painted of Africa right now is that Africa is overrun by Russian mercenaries, and because of that, it's being used to basically possibly call for some type of proxy wars inside of the future. So this is obviously a strategic move by the NATO countries. The other thing I want to point out, though, is that it's very ironic. France literally admitted to bombing a wedding inside of Mali. I think it was in 2021. So a year ago, right? This was like right before or maybe 2 years ago, like right before the military junta took power. France was being accused of killing innocent people. They said that they basically killed Islamist insurgents. That was not true. And there was a call that the United Nations bring charges against France. Nothing happened, of course. So this is hypocrisy on multiple levels, and we're not going to fall for it. I mean, it's clearly not good that we see so much violence happening inside of African countries. I don't necessarily assume that whenever they say these people were militants or whatnot, that that's the truth. I don't know. I'm not there. But what I do know is that whenever you see people strategically bringing up facts to support their narrative, it's always going to come with an agenda. The agenda is that they are absolutely upset that France has been ousted from Mali in large part, not completely, but in large part. And they obviously are not happy with this military junta. So they're basically doing what they have to do to demonize them, to make them look like they're up to no good, because what they ultimately want is to intervene inside of Mali. They want to liberate Mali. That's what they're going to say that they did. Of course, they want to reimpose the colonial relationships inside of Mali. That's what they ultimately want. So I would say that this is propaganda, but you should read the story and let me know your thoughts. Haiti has been going through a lot within the last few years, and really, oh gosh, for I don't know for how long, really just ongoingly because of US imperialism. So right now the people are protesting. Of course, right now there's another proxy government being set up inside of Haiti. They're pretending that the assassination of Jovenel Moise, which was orchestrated by the United States government, has come out, is something that they're trying to remedy, but instead they're trying to make sure that Haiti remains compliant with US interests and US imperialism. By the way, I always get upset whenever people talk about Russian intervention inside of Ukraine. The same people who will either justify or turn a blind eye to US intervention inside of a country like Haiti, like a small island that really should not matter to a big imperialist giant. But of course, they're going to impose whatever they want on Haiti, particularly because of the proximity to the United States. So hypocrisy shows in many ways, right? Now, Haitian protesters have burned a plane that belongs to a U.S. missionary group. That's what's being reported. It says Haitians took to the streets on Tuesday to protest rising insecurity with demonstrations turning violent in the southern city of Les Quilles, where people stormed the airport and attacked and burned a small plane owned by a U.S. missionary group. The Haitian demonstrators were protesting against crime in the city on Tuesday, and they burned a plane. The plane belonged to the Agape Flights, which is a local media, which is what local media report is saying. The protesters entered the airport, and even though the police fired tear gas at the group, according to a video of the incident filmed by an online media group, they burned down the plane. Now, of course, this is going to add more fervor to the narrative that Haiti is unstable, don't go there. But we should also keep in mind there's a history of these U.S. missionary groups inside of Haiti, particularly one a couple years ago that came out and was discovered that the actual missionaries were molesting children inside of Haiti. And so whenever they burned down, I believe, one of their facilities, these things were actually being targeted. So I think it's important for us to not fall for necessarily the narratives and understand that there's a lot that's happening here. I think overall, the presence of these foreign entities inside of a country that has been very clear that they're not really for this type of presence. They're not for these organizations, these charities. They're not necessarily for them because a lot of times these charities are working collaboratively with the United States government. So seriously, we have to keep in mind that our people are suffering there and that the media is going to do everything that they can to try to label them as violent, but we can't fall into those types of narratives or use that type of language. Now, some positive news. I'm sure that you may have heard this already, but Amazon has a union, at least one. So Amazon's union is part of a legacy of Black labor organizing. I chose this article because obviously a lot of the articles that are covering this new union inside of an Amazon facility, they're covering it more so from, I would say, a non-racial racial lens, but I feel like this article did a good job talking about the history of Black labor organizing. So on April 1st, 2022, Jeff Bezos received some news that he wished was an April Fool's joke. Amazon warehouse workers in Staten Island, New York, won their vote to create a union, beating the odds and making history in the process. The face of the shutdown Amazon movement, a working class Black man named Christian Smalls, is building on the legacy of Black labor leaders whose efforts define generations. While there were countless articles profiling Smalls, few have acknowledged the long history of Black labor organizers taking helm of workers' rights movements. He was subjected to a smear campaign by Amazon and dismissed as not smart or articulate by company leaders. Now, in 2020, Amazon's own demographic data also revealed that nearly 63% of its warehouse and call center workers were Black, Latino, Native American, or multiracial, 63%, compared to 21% of its corporate workforce. The Pew Research Center found that the majority of jobs that were being lost amid the pandemic were concentrated in the service sector, where in 2018, Black or African American and Latino workers were overrepresented. Ironically, these workers are considered unskilled, to some unworthy of a living wage, healthcare, and or financial security. Yet unprotected workers in these jobs are coming together to fight for better wages and working conditions, as we have seen at Amazon. And I always think that's ironic because a lot of people try to act like people inside of these jobs that you work with your hands, or these more laborious jobs, don't deserve like healthcare, or don't deserve proper wages and things like that, or don't basically, like, you don't have the education, therefore you should not be deserving of these things. Yet honestly, I mean, just from my own witnessing of corporate America, a lot of times the people who are working the most lucrative jobs with the most benefit packages are doing not nearly as much work, especially not the backbreaking work that a lot of these people are doing inside of these factories. Amazon's factories are very known to be highly dangerous environments. A lot of people we keep hearing have died on the job there. And Jeff Bezos, a real capitalist, call him whatever you want, Jeff Bezos has successfully prevented the union up until this point, which is actually like crazy if you think about it. I mean, all of the workers, all of the people who work for Amazon, he has really been able to prevent a union for all this time. And because he's a greedy person, because he's one of these capitalist people who want it all for themselves, he has basically made this his mission to prevent unionization. So I'm happy that this happened, obviously, and we should definitely apply this brother Christopher Smalls, and hopefully we see more of these types of things happening in Amazon facilities. In our last story, I guess a contrasting story, we have good news of a labor organizing effort that worked instead of Staten Island. But if you look at globally, there's still things that are being done by these corporations that are not necessarily happening in the same type of way for African people, depending on where you are. Now, Facebook has faced suit over work conditions in Kenya. According to reports, a former employee of Facebook in Kenya was fired after questioning work conditions and threatened to sue Meta for wrongful termination. The East African newspaper reported that Daniel Motong, a former content moderator of the social media platform, claims he was fired for trying to organize a trade union with his 100 co-workers in the Nairobi office to protest what they felt were exploitative working conditions. Content moderators like Daniel are the most important and least discussed aspect of Facebook's global operations. Their job is to sift through social media posts. Facebook's nearly 3 billion monthly users and remove posts that violate its rules, such as graphic violence, hate, and misinformation. They stated that the nature of the work of the job could lead to PTSD, which has not been addressed. Facebook subcontracts most of this work to companies like Sama, a practice that keeps Facebook's profit margins high, but at the cost of thousands of moderators' health and the safety of Facebook worldwide. Sama moderators report ongoing violations, including conditions which are unsafe, degrading, and yet impose a risk of PTSD. The lawyers said that the claimant believed that Sama participated in unlawful union busting. Now, this is very similar to Facebook also having a similar factory inside, or not factory, a similar operation inside of South Africa. So essentially, it seems like a lot of the people doing content moderation are Africans. They literally have exported this to the African continent as a way to save money, as a way to avoid unionization, because while we might have certain protections in the US, trust me, I mean, it's a lot easier to manipulate politicians, public officials, police departments, military officials in order to ensure that not only are the laws not going to protect you depending on where you are in Africa, but that you're going to basically put some force behind it and ensure that people who are trying to get better conditions are not going to achieve that. So it's very unfortunate that a lot of our people who love Facebook, we don't think about the fact that there's people literally inside of different working facilities that are viewing content. And the thing about the content moderation, we might not think about it too much, but there's a lot of things that get removed from social media before you ever get to touch it. A lot of graphic things. So if you think about torture, murder, child pornography, like all types of things that you might not even think that you would even see on Facebook, there's people who have to sift through all of that and they have to flag it. But before they can flag it, they have to watch it. These people a lot of times are coming from the African continent. This is how Facebook has been able to, again, avoid unionization and avoid basically having to be held responsible for any negative effects that these people suffer. So it's something to be aware of. Like I said, there's another thing happening in South Africa where I think they're also either suing Facebook or they're trying to for similar egregious claims. And so we're going to definitely keep watching this and hope that these types of exportation of jobs to the African continent will cease in the future. So that's all I have for this week. Please do go to wechargecolonialism.org if you want to catch up on our articles, catch up on different things that we have posted on there. If you want to donate to us, you can donate on our website as well. In addition, you could also register for the Pan-African Unity or Parish Convention. It's happening this July, and that will be actually played in a video very soon. In addition, I also want to remind you all, if you want to get the stories right away, I'll post them inside of my Telegram group right away after this video. The link is down below to access Telegram. It's an app that's decentralized, so censorship is not going to be an issue there. With that, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.
I think what we are suffering from is ideological confusion. That is, that we're not clear, we're not thinking clearly, and that we need a context within which to answer the question, is something good or bad? We assume that we have the same goals, but we never say what they are. It's time for us to think and articulate and establish our goals as Black nationalists and Pan-Africanists. We need vision, we need clarity. Otherwise, we can't answer the question, is it good for African people? Nationalist goals is self-determination. In the spirit of Delaney, Garvey, Malcolm, Amos, it is Pan-African commitment, that is the unity of African people worldwide and one Africa on the continent as a basis for African strength. So we are about building a Pan-African world order based on the principles of Ma'at, not in imitation of a European order. Ma'at as justice and truth. We need a nation concept, as Dr. Clark told us. A Black economic program, a cultural program, an independent political organization, independent Black media, independent African-centered education financed by us and controlled by us. All of this presupposes, very importantly, an African Black identity.